Your goal as a leader is to make sure that your team is performing. What are the indicators or KPIs that you can use to measure that success? That's what we're talking about in this video, so stay tuned. Whether you're a seasoned manager or a newbie trying to figure out what to do, we're gonna cover everything that you would need to know about KPIs. I'm gonna link to some chapters below so that you can jump to whatever section that you're gonna go through. But here are the couple of things that we're gonna talk about. First, we're gonna talk about why are KPIs important. Second, we're gonna talk about what are the types of KPIs that you can measure as a manager. And third, we're gonna talk about what are some examples of those KPIs that you can actually get very granular with. By the end of this video, you will have everything that you need in your KPI toolkit to make sure that you're measuring your team effectively, whether you're measuring them for workflow purposes, operation purposes, or something like employee reviews. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. First, let's talk about why are KPIs important. KPIs stand for key performance indicators, and they're really your way as a manager of measuring employee success, employee effectiveness, whether it be productivity, efficiency, customer satisfaction, whatever things that you need to measure in your role as a manager. Those are all things that you want to make sure you keep track of over a long period of time, let's say 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, however long that you're managing your team. You want to make sure that you have those KPIs, those key performance metrics, to measure how successful your team is currently and trend them over time to see if you're able to improve whatever metrics that you're tracking. And also, KPIs can be used for motivation. A lot of times companies will use KPIs or some sort of metric or some sort of measurement to incentivize employees to work a little bit harder or to improve their processes in order to get bonuses or things like that. At the end of the day, your job as a manager is to make sure that your team is effective and efficient. And with KPIs, that's one way that you can track them. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the types of KPIs that you can do, kind of the big buckets to get you kind of thinking. And then within that, we're gonna talk about what are specific examples of KPIs that might fall under those specific categories. The first KPI that you can track as a manager is personal growth KPIs. This is something that would track how employees are doing, if they're learning new skills, and if they're developing holistically. Some examples of personal growth indicators might be things like number of certifications achieved or number of courses completed. Anything that can show you from a trackable standpoint how an employee is investing and growing in new skills. It could be the number of hours that they've worked on developing a new skill. Let's say they are a designer, just as an example, and they are putting time in learning a new software, a new project, or a new platform that they weren't previously accustomed to. That's a really good indicator for you to track. The second kind of KPI is productivity KPIs. This KPI measures the amount of work being done within a certain time frame. Examples, very high-level examples of what productivity KPIs might be are things like the number of projects completed. Or another thing is the amount of time that's spent on a project. That's really helpful if you work in a service-based industry or if you work in a service-based function where you are receiving requests and have to output something. Let's say if you're working in an agency, you need to know if I'm receiving a project, am I able to get this project out? How many hours were worked on it? Why did it take so long, or what was making it so efficient? Either way. The third type of KPI that you can measure is efficiency. This KPI measures the amount of resources that it takes to complete a project. An example of efficiency KPI would be something like keeping track of people's time as it relates to the project that they need to execute. Or in a factory setting, cost of units produced. So as a holistic value, something with efficiency would be keeping an eye on how many resources, whether it be time or actual material, that it takes to complete a project or to complete a product or whatever that would be, to see if you can reduce the overall consumption of those resources to be more efficient. The fourth type of KPI that you can track is quality assurance. This KPI measures whether or not a product or a service is meeting a specific minimum threshold. Quality assurance can be an organizational-wide KPI, or it can be something that you as a manager are tracking with your employees specifically. Things like a percentage of defects found in a product, or number of customer complaints. Anything that you can measure that allows you to track whether or not an employee is performing or not performing based on the minimum standards that are set by your organization. The fifth type of KPI that you can track is customer satisfaction. This KPI measures the satisfaction that your customer gets from your product or service. An example of this KPI would be a percent of your customers who are satisfied with your product or service. Or in some instances, things like net promoter scores are really important when it comes to customer service roles, if you have a customer service team and they are taking direct calls with customers who have complaints, who have issues. Those type of surveys that happen after where you say ask for feedback, if you're seeing that one employee is scoring really high and one employee is scoring really low, that's an example of customer satisfaction KPIs that you can keep track of. The sixth thing that you can track is accountability and attendance. This KPI measures attendance and punctuality when it comes to an employee. Types of examples like this might be on-time arrivals if you work with a delivery system, or average hours absent within a given period. And the last type of KPI is safety and compliance. This KPI measures safety in the workplace. Some examples of KPIs in this category would be things like number of incidents within a certain time period. Or another example is percent of trained employees on a given procedure. There are so many other types of key performance indicators that you can implement as a manager, but hopefully these kind of types or these overviews of KPIs for employee performance is a really beneficial list for you. If you have any other KPIs or types or examples that you use to measure your team, list them down below in the comments. I'll be anxious to hear that. And if this video was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And with that, I'll see you on the next one.